Hey, this is John Ridley.
And this is Matt Carey, documentary editor, Deadline.com.
And Matt, we don't usually, I'm laughing, I'm entertaining myself. We don't usually leave Deadline built us a multi-million dollar podcast recording
Ah, it's
studio.
gorgeous.
It's a phenomenal, state of the art. So we often feel bad just leaving. We didn't even ask for it. They just built it. Obviously, kidding on the square, that every once in a while we like to go on the road. But I just should mention that as you and I speak, while I am in the comfort of my own home, you're actually on the road right now doing what you do, going out in the world and being a top flight journalist.
Well, thank you. That's a very flattering title. I don't know whether I deserve it,
Top
but
flight
yes, I'm at the
journalist.
Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival in Arkansas, which is the longest running all documentary festival, certainly in the US, I think in North America. And as you say, we were just on the road up in San Francisco for Doc Stories.
We went over Doc Stories. As all of these festivals, they continue to evolve and grow a little bit. If you can just explain a little bit what's going on in San Francisco and just kind of set up uh, our trip up there. And then we're going to introduce some folks that we had the chance to speak with.
Yes, Doc Stories is a program of SF Film, and SF Film also puts on the San Francisco International Film Festival, which is well into its 60s in terms of age. Doc Stories, meanwhile, is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. It's a very curated, small program of films, runs just over 4 days, across 4 days in San Francisco, but highlighting some of the very best documentaries of the year.
Yeah, they do an amazing program up there. I was not familiar with all they do. Obviously, as you mentioned, they do the festivals, but also really support artists in general and certainly artists and documentary storytellers from the Bay Area. Here's our conversation with Ann Lai, the executive director of SF Film, and Jesse Fairbanks, who is the director of programming.
John, I feel like we're having a summit meeting here. We are across the table from two very distinguished members of the film community, not just documentary. We are talking documentary, of course, today with Ann Lai, the executive director of SF Film, and Jesse Fairbanks, who is the director of programming for SF Film. Here to talk about Doc Stories, 10th anniversary. Why did SF Film decide to launch a documentary festival?
It's a great question. 10 years ago, our predecessors, Noah Cowan and Rachel Rosen, saw an opportunity to add a series to the suite of events that we offer year round at SF Film. There is a vibrant, beautiful documentary community here in the Bay Area, and they realized that that was a missed opportunity not to celebrate it. And there are a couple of other factors that went into it, including that we have a very large AMPAS presence here in the Bay Area, and that we're well
Yeah.
positioned to lift up nonfiction filmmakers who have either come through our program or who we know through our relationships. So we're really humble and grateful that the festival has done as well as it has in the first 10 years and are excited for the decade ahead.
In terms of how you organize it, it's distinctive because it's quite a small program. Many festivals, well, like IDFA, has, I think, 250 films. Good luck to anyone who, I mean, it's not humanly possible. Even over the course of a year, you'd be pushing it to try to see that many. But here, you don't show the films concurrently, so actually people can see all of the films. You're not racing from one to the other and saying, oh man, I'd love to go here, but, you know, so that's by design, you're doing it that way.
I like to think that it's like selfish,
Mhm.
that you can be able to do it. I was thinking about this from last year when Lisa Cortez was here, and we were showing, I think, Little Richard, and she had been on the circuit showing her film, but
The
she hadn't been
circuit.
able to see anything. And so I kept seeing her, and she goes, "Yeah, I can actually catch up on stuff. I don't have to do anything else while I'm here." And so to to us, the idea that you don't have to be competing against what you're choosing to see, and that it has this really um, clear selection, and then we hope that you will sit down and stay through everything is also a big contrast to our festival in the spring. So it was, I think it's a little bit selfish, but I think it's smart. I like to think.
And the festival in the spring that you're mentioning, this will be the San Francisco International Film Festival, which is the oldest in the US or maybe North
In the
America.
Americas.
In the
In the
Americas.
Wow.
Americas, I know. We're
Wow.
working on getting the message out. But yeah, it'll be our
Wow.
68th iteration of the San Francisco International Film Festival in April of 2025.
Yeah, it's a mere 62 for the New York Film Festival.
Yeah.
So
Don't
you
don't
are
tell them that we're
okay.
68.
You are pulling rank on them, but in terms of how you choose the films, it comes at a particularly relevant time of year in the sense that we are very much into Oscar season and award season. And you have films, certainly in this year's festival, and I think for all of the doc stories that you've done, that are awards contenders, and some have distribution, like The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, which is Netflix, and some do not, like No Other Land. So it's an interesting combination. How do you choose them, and what is a film that seems right to doc stories?
It's a really challenging process. We have 10 feature slots this year and 2 short blocks. So it's actually harder when you have fewer slots to back into because there is an incredible wealth of films out there and really beautiful stories being told. We do benefit from the fact that it is award season and that we are trying to bring to the Bay Area audience exciting new documentaries that they perhaps haven't seen that are going to pop and perhaps go the distance. But we're really focused on just kind of showing the best that the documentary industry has to offer. And so we do offer platforms as well to films that perhaps haven't broken through the noise or are flying under the radar. Typically, I would say this festival is showcasing films that usually have a lot of support and distribution behind them. I would say normally it's like a 30 to 70 breakup where there's, 30% of the titles don't have any
Uh,
distribution yet, but the rest of them actually have partners. It is the inverse this year. Most of the films at the festival this year do not have not sold. Like our opening and our closing night film have not sold. No Other Land has not sold. Most of the films here are still working on that part.
And is that happenstance or by choice normally you want a particular balance, or the way it just broke out this year, th- you had more that had not sold versus, or is there a third possibility? We are seeing changes in the doc space
Mhm.
and in the business and who's getting behind what, and even when they're getting behind what it is, more celebrity, more true crime. Do you think that may be a bleed down? That they're
Yeah.
just not selling as much, unfortunately.
It's the latter. We don't program based on who has on distribution. We program based on merit, but it's always
Right.
lovely if a film is has propulsion. But yeah, we are seeing seismic changes in the documentary industry right now. We've gone through what everyone calls the golden era. There's a lot of hand wringing right now about what
Mhm.
is the future of the industry. That is something that we're actually digging into over the weekend. We have 2 free talks dedicated to talking about kind of the data that's available to us about where there is growth and opportunity with audiences for documentary films. And then we have several luminaries who were kind of part of the architects of the golden era of documentary talking about what needs to change in terms of economic paradigms, in terms of distribution, in terms of festival engagement, in terms of funder support, in terms of filmmaker expectation. And we'll be talking about all of that on Saturday afternoon.
You talk about metrics and things like that. Are there any things, even if they're bigger and broader, that you could share, or trends that you are seeing in terms of the metrics that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's well known that like the 3 Cs, which some people define differently, but whether it's celebrity crime and cult or celebrity crime and cause, have been huge drivers for
What was the last
those
one? Cult and Cause?
cause.
Cause.
Yeah, so social justice,
Mhm.
social action films. Those have been huge drivers in the last few years. There's been a
Right.
voracious appetite for that, especially on
The streaming.
streaming
Yeah.
platforms. Thank you. And
I know sometimes that word streamer
the
just it
it
gets
just
caught
it just flies out of
and
your
just
head.
like, meh, what is that?
What's that thing that we all watch?
Beelzebub, what is that?
So yes, definitely there has been, there was a huge audience interest in it. And so that really helped motivate, I think, a lot of decisions about what titles were being picked up. I also think that, the documentary industry is known for being scrappy and
Yeah,
defiant and tenacious.
yeah.
And the industry has gone through multiple iterations of innovation over the decades and will continue to do so. I have a lot of optimism and hope about where and how filmmakers are going to continue to make this work and get it to audiences.
And I want to ask you about I think people by and large do know that there's for a long time been a thriving film community in San Francisco, but they probably think of it more for the narrative side of the business. I mean, going way back, I guess Charlie Chaplin was even up here. More recently, we certainly obviously think of George Lucas, but Chris Columbus, other people like that. But do you have the sense that people don't realize what a thriving documentary community is up here? You have people based here, and I mean, there's something about the ethos of this town that really lends itself to what documentary is all about, of these culturally engaged kinds of films.
I think everybody who is maybe in the documentary space like understands there's a very big hub here. There are significant schools here of journalism and universities of journalism, and so that obviously is a natural driver, and there are different styles of going into documentary work. But I think because it is a place that is a culture and a town and a region known for counterculture,
Mhm.
known for being inquisitive, known for sort of challenging norms, and known for trying to champion certain things that are not getting attention. It's a very natural place
Mm.
for that to be. I think that it's a very supportive community that's here, often sharing work with each other and trying to help each other out. And so, in that sense, for me, it was a little bit of not so much of a surprise of as well, of course, that's what it would be. I wonder why, why it may be a little bit hidden, but it is a exciting thing to be a part of. And I think that there's a strong um, geographical sense of purpose in a
Mm.
way.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it. I certainly think of BAVC, the Bay Area Video Coalition, and then Stanford has, a really well known, prominent film
Yeah,
program.
Stanford, Berkeley, ITVS is around the corner from our offices where we're
ITVS,
sitting
yeah.
now, and so there's something great in that dialogue, and I think that there's also very different styles sort of happening as well in terms of how that work is happening, and that's also great.
Mm. Can you talk about the larger engagement, not just with the established filmmaking community, but what you're doing to support up and coming filmmakers and the education programs that you have?
Yeah, it's one of the things that really drew me to be at SFFilm, and when I first got to know the organization was that there's this incredibly prominent festival, the longest running, festival in the Americas.
In
We'll
the
just
Americas.
continue to keep saying that.
Take that, New York.
And also, there is this opportunity when we think about the ecosystem of how you make a film, how films go out into the world. And so, to me, the festival touches on a really critical part of how are you this thing that everyone is focusing attention and resources on. It needs to get to audiences. No one's making something that just sort of sits there and no one has access to. So that is very the most visible and kind of the widest funnel, I think, of how people get to know us. But our education program, which brings over 16,000 students a year, either into cinemas or to look at work online and be seeing work very early on before it's being released. So it feels exciting and it's very grown up in a way, but the conversation that they're able to have with filmmakers and talent behind it and ask really great questions because kids do. That is exciting. We think of it as, in a formal way, it's sort of media literacy, but to me, it's about opening up an opportunity to see yourself reflected, but also to understand the world and ask kind of difficult questions, and to be able to understand like, oh, how would I do that? How would I approach it? Our artist development program is something also that I am such a fan of. We give out about $600,000 in direct artist grants every year, supporting probably about 30 to 40 bespoke projects throughout the year. We have a huge focus on Bay Area filmmakers, both documentary and narrative, through our residency program. The space that we're sitting in is a space that they can use for casting sessions, for script readings, for sitting down and basically working. You need to be in a quiet space, and where you live doesn't offer that to you. How do you be a professional as someone developing work? And for us, the other, important component of that too is the granting program, and the other work that we do is also international and national. So how are we bringing different voices into the room, different perspectives into the room, and different ways of approaching work?
When you talk about different ways of approaching work
Mm.
and particularly engaging in younger people, and part of this question also deals with where docs are. obviously, feature length docs challenges both in the financing and getting it done and then getting it out there. And there's so much of what younger people are doing in the content space where things are shorter form. And even with my boys, I try to tell them, look, if you can go out and tell a story, it doesn't need to be hour and 20 minutes if it reaches people. There's one film that we're talking about today. I'm going to butcher the name. Forgive me. Arepas in Bichi, which,
BC. I
Yes.
yeah,
think they say
Arepas
BC.
in BC. Yeah.
that's why Matt Carey goes with me
Oh,
everywhere. Both his intelligence in terms of documentaries and his ability to basically
well, I
pronounce
got one thing
anything
right
in
today.
any language from anywhere on the planet Earth. I've never seen
Oh,
anyone can do all
well, I'm
that.
flattered.
What I loved about that documentary, though, is it really felt like something that even if you saw it, and I don't mean this to disparage YouTube or any place else, they have terrific things out there, the quality and the engagement was like, oh, okay, everything about this is on another level. But it was also to me not necessarily a documentary that tried to educate me, but tried to get me to experience.
I would say about a rapist in BC. I'm saying it wrong. Even in that, the thing that struck me as I'm watching it, it's like it feels like an action movie, but it's a movie about someone sort of discovering what's going to work for them. And it's very internal, but the way in which it's so external and literally is you're like flying down the street on this bike and you're going on this journey that's incredibly physical. I'm like, that's so clever.
Yeah.
It works so well. It's so cinematic. It shouldn't be. And it's incredibly
Mhm.
cinematic. So to me, it's like, wow, how would you? I want to see what they're going to do. I want to see what else they're able to do. And that to me is sort of like you could find 5 different people to tell that story and be compelling in incredibly, incredibly different ways. But I would have never pegged like, oh, I think that was sort of an action movie opening. And I just took me by surprise
Hmm.
in the best kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really exciting piece of filmmaking. We're going to get to speak with the filmmakers very shortly.
Just to build off of that is this idea of being thoughtful of what might be in the zeitgeist or what might be
Mhm.
popular or how are we, democratizing content getting to audiences. Those are obviously all contexts that we work within as curators, but something that I love about being here at SF Film is that Anne, we have a little bit of church and state, and Anne has really created a space for me and my team to be able to program agnostically. And so we go after films based on merit. And then we work really closely with our colleagues in the artist development department and in education. And we're always uncovering these happy, beautiful connective tissues.
Mm.
And so when we saw Arepas and Beachy, the
BC.
BC, thank you. All
I'm
right.
telling you, Matt,
I'm the fact
That's
checker.
Matt
good.
Carey.
Arepas and BC.
I wanted to say Beachy when I first saw it too.
I know, but BC, Arepas and BC, the programmer who uncovered this is Jordan Klein, and he fell in love with the film and was advocating for it. And we were trying to find a place for it in one of our programs. And it was only after we started moving forward that we realized that the filmmaker had a relationship with Keith Swolfer, who's our director of education, had been a part of going to educational screenings with SF Film growing up, and that had helped invigorate and inspire him to become a filmmaker, and now we're getting to see the fruits of that. And we discover this all the time. Our closing night film is Suburban Fury, directed by Robinson Devor, who you're going to be speaking with briefly. He came to SF Film and got a grant from SF Film 13 years ago when this film was a narrative, and we believed in it then. And now it's a documentary, and it's closing out the 10th anniversary of the Doc Stories Festival.
Mm.
I've never seen a documentary film shot like this. It's like a 1970s thriller. But there's all these beautiful through lines that just really speak to the volume of work that happens at SF Film.
The other thing that I would say too is the privilege that we get to have is that we get to have multiple touching points for a filmmaker throughout their career and certainly throughout a project. And that feels also in a way sort of necessary in the space. How do we do that? And we understand there are other organizations that do that and we can feel competitive and also at the same time it requires it in order to get something made, which is it needs support. And so how do we collectively find those places where we can be um, be some kind of resource at different points in a career, at different points in a film.
And we spoke with you 2 or 3 months ago for Doc Talk about the state of film festivals. And we just heard earlier this week that hot docs will be happening. That was very good news because look, it might be going away and things can change. I wonder if there's any more optimism, just generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always challenging, right? There's not film, independent film generally and arts, it's always challenging. It never isn't. I don't tend to think of things so much as in crisis as just being in transition. It is just constantly evolving. And what we don't know is what is it evolving into? What's going to be sort of the next thing? But I have so much confidence that it will continue to evolve. I do feel optimistic about festivals. I think it's challenging for the financial model, all of the things. It's not I don't think festivals are designed to make tons of money, or at least film festivals. I think they're maybe the music industry is much smarter than we are. It is very much about how do we accomplish this? How do we create the space? How do we bring all these filmmakers together? How do we drive audiences in a way that feels so much more critical now because streaming is going through its own evolution right now. Um, what you are able to see if you can sort of build a great relationship with your audience and some trust is take a little bit of risk and have a little bit of faith and maybe see something that isn't the algorithm is not going to feed back to you. That's what we can be able to do. I do think it will continue to be challenging. I'm excited by seeing other festivals find ways of how they are keeping their heads above water and still trying to prioritize the films, try to prioritize the filmmakers. So I think for us, as we constantly talk about that, how do we do that? If that stays our North Star, how we're making great experiences for the films, the filmmakers, and for the audiences, then we'll be fine.
Well, it's been great to have you on Doc Talk, and thank you for having us up in San Francisco for the 10th anniversary of Doc Stories. Now I'm mispronouncing it. See, I did okay with Arepas NBC, and then I was just about to mess up Anne's name. Pardon me for that. Being joined by Anne Lai, the executive director of SF Film, and Jesse Fairbanks, the director of programming for SF Film. Thank you so much for having us up here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. This is so it's exciting.
Oh, thanks. We're
And thank you
excited
for
about
caring
it.
about documentary film.
Hey, we're all in on that for sure.
I have to be honest, I came for the food. So I
I do actually think we should order.
So as mentioned, Matt, the folks up at SF Film, they don't just put on amazing film festivals, they actually really do try to help identify and elevate documentary storytellers in general, and certainly those coming out of the Bay Area. You and I had the opportunity to see a short form documentary where one of the co-directors actually came through some of that educational programming through San Francisco Film. And the film we saw was really beautiful. It was really about personifying both the Bay Area and some issues that are going on in America right now about immigration and identity and things like that. But, and I mean this in the best possible way, this is also a film that really hits you in the gut.
John, it hit me in the gut too because it's about food. It is a sumptuous short documentary film, Arepas NBC. And here's our conversation with the co-directors of the film, Yona Mosshammer and Brennan McGee. John, we were talking with Anne and Jesse about a really extraordinary short film that is premiering here at Doc Stories, Arepas and BC.
You got
We'll
it.
make sure we don't
you got that
pronounce it
right.
beachy. We were having an argument about that.
There's been a lot of conversations around your film before you even got here.
That's right. But we're joined now by the directors of the film, Yona Mosshammer and Brennan McGee. Great to be with you on Doc Talk. I think you better explain initially what an arepa is, or arepas, plural.
Yeah, so an arepa is a traditional Venezuelan sandwich, which has meat and usually meat and then rice and beans and some cheese. Sometimes they have plantains in them, so you can get a bunch of different kinds of arepas. But it's like a classic staple in Venezuela, and then they make them in other South American countries too. But
And yeah, and I need to point out that this is not a film about a sandwich. It's a film about the guy making the sandwich. This is Victor Aguilera, who grew up in Venezuela And it's really quite a remarkable person, a remarkable journey as to how he became a chef and became a bit of a sensation in San Francisco. But how did you find this guy?
Yeah.
Was it through the Eater article or
It was through SF Eater, yeah.
yeah?
One of our producers, Connor Hades, he found the story initially and sent it our way, and immediately I connected. I think we connected to the story for different reasons. I connected to it from a mental health point of view because he was lost and struggled for many years defining his identity and kind of tapping back into his Venezuelan roots. And along the way, going through a process of um, sort of transcending a lot of the difficulties, the dark parts of his past, and reemerging as this new person.
Can I don't want to interrupt, but when you talk about relating to it in the mental health space, and I'm really appreciate you bring that up because I do think obviously we don't talk and deal enough about mental health in general, but particularly Black and Brown communities. And I'm curious for you, not getting too personal, why in particular the mental health aspect. And he talks about the toxic environments and a lot of things that we see on TV that are attractive in the chefery world. It's not really a word,
Yeah,
but it really affected him. So I'd love for you to just take a minute and really talk about that.
sure. I think Victor's path mirrors mine in a small way, in that um, after he had left Venezuela, he struggled with direction. He was in Miami, lost, and his connection with his parents was a little bit frayed. So trying to figure out how to become this new person in this new space, this incredibly chaotic space, um, defining that for himself. For me, I struggled with anxiety and depression following high school, figuring out who I was, trying to rediscover my sense of direction, led me to, struggle for many years figuring out what it was I cared about, what it was I wanted to spend my time doing. Um, and there was this process of rediscovery in me, just like there was in Victor, to realize like, oh, I care deeply. For me, it's I care deeply about stories and
Right.
filmmaking, and the existential crisis of, do I want to become a software engineer? Do I want to do something more practical? Had to kind of cease for me to be brave enough to go after the thing that I'd always wanted to do since age 10, which is just make movies. Um, and I think uh, Victor's path mirrors that. Um, in the sense that he had to rediscover that the thing that he wanted to do was make food,
Mm.
make traditional Venezuelan food, the thing that initially drew him to the culinary space.
I had amazing grandmas that were always cooking, and I would just be in the kitchen all the time, not helping, just eating and absorbing. I don't remember the first arepa that I made, but when I was 4, my father would only spend Sundays in the house. I would wake up early morning, make coffee in one of those old school cafeteras, and then I would make arepas for my mom and my dad, and I'd bring them to the bed every week. So it kind of just became tradition. Back then, there was lecture, there was care, and there was just a lot of love. Just from those memories, not sure how, but I still remember how to bring those flavors back.
This is a marvelously cinematic film, just in terms of how you shot it. I mean, man, what a fantastically edited film as well. But you've got a story, you've got a concept, but that could be an article. It could be a written thing. How are you thinking cinematically of how you tell this and then bring it off in the way that you do? Because one of the things we learn about Victor is that he's delivering the food and he's getting around in San Francisco on a bicycle, which anyone who's ever been to San Francisco or seen anything, that is not an easy thing to do. But you make it so visual. I just wanted to compliment you on that and find out about your approach, both of you, how you approach that.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, I think just the image of this guy on a fixed gear bicycle going up and down like Russian Hill and all of the crazy hills in San Francisco, delivering food was like the image that sort of caught me. I was like, wait, this guy's delivering all the food like by himself. Like this is a crazy feat. And then sort of realizing like after doing a few phone calls with him and sort of understanding like, oh, there's a deeper story about his like immigrant past and like his whole, relationship to food and the joy that he gets from making Venezuelan food. um I think visually we thought that this guide, biking through the city, was a great vehicle to sort of like immerse the audience and get everybody, interested in the film, and then kind of we could go back and visit some memories from the past and sort of tell the story of, how he got to this point where he was doing this thing. And yeah, I
Mm.
think that's kind of how we thought of it. And I personally was really I'm always inspired by movies like City of God and really like
Mm.
immersive films that are, use sound design and
Uh,
visuals and stuff like that to really get in the character's headspace. So
Also say we only had a couple days of shooting initially, and so when we went into the editing room, we realized we only had so much footage to play with,
mm.
and we had to be really strategic about what shot we used where. Like this shot needs to align with this part of the narrative. So we were really selective about how the shots were used, and then we ended up having to do these kind of pickup shots that we did alone because we were not in San Francisco, we were in LA while we were editing most of it.
Oh, interesting.
Um, and we ended up
Aha.
doing these little shots like there's a lot of all the sync shots, a lot of the sync shots, a lot of the pickups were pickups, just shot in my apartment
Mm.
or Yona's apartment. A lot of the cooking moments were shot in Yona's apartment or my apartment. The burning of the photographs, that was all later, and it was all done because we realized we needed to fill these gaps and kind of flesh out
Interesting.
some of the visuals that were missing.
Let me just ask, and I don't mean to ask this because obviously recreations and things like that, everything that you did was incredibly well integrated in the film. But like the burning of and I can't even pronounce the food, but that was truly a recreation because it was so lovingly done. I mean, I literally was commenting on just things like that. Those visuals really brought me into what was going on and the emotionality. The burning of the photos I just thought was very interesting
yeah.
because visually it was even a little different because it was more melting of the film than like Bonanza opening. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For anyone
I
80,
get that
82 and
reference.
younger, 82 and older will get that reference. Um, but there was also, to me, the burning of the food, but also just using fire. Fire can destroy, fire can create, fire can be horrible, fire can be beautiful. I thought all of those things they didn't feel random. So it's interesting to hear you say that they really were thought of later, which is, again, is not unusual. But I'm curious about in the creation of those, the artistic approach in putting them together because they were very artful.
We had a few discussions about how do we recreate parts of his past
Mm.
and do it in a way that's in his point of view and not in a cheesy uh, kind of objective way. Um, and so we had to get creative about how to do that. The burning of the photographs, because there's this toxic part of his past, especially in Miami,
Yeah.
and because we're talking about food, we thought that it might. We were honestly afraid that
Set
it.
fire to it.
Yeah, we were afraid though it was going to be a little bit too over the top. So we ended up filming it just to test it.
Mm.
And I think that we even used a camera that was lower quality than the other cameras initially because we weren't planning on using it.
Interesting.
And then we realized, oh, this works, and it's not. I hope it's not over the top. We hope that it because that moment specifically in the film is harrowing for him. You know, he almost lost himself
Yeah.
in a drug addiction. It ended up playing for us, like the emotion of the severity of the fire ended up playing for us emotionally, and we think that it works.
When I found out that I was gonna be a father, that's when I finally like put a stop to it and got clean. And I took myself to culinary school, and I landed a job at this restaurant called Tarpon Bend. I went from pantry, moved to the fry station, to the wok, to the grill. I was falling in love with food.
And there's a beautiful subjectivity to the imagery, I think, that makes it much more powerful and I think evocative for viewers. Brennan, you're based in Arizona, and Yona, you're now based in LA. However, you are a San Francisco native and a veteran of the SF Film education programs, including the schools at the festival program. What did that mean to you? You spent a lot of years involved in that. What did that mean to you in your development as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I remember going to SF film like screenings as a kid, and it would always be like a weekday, and it was like my favorite part of the week. Like it would like we would look forward to me and my sister would look forward to those
Wow.
screenings, and it was honestly just like I'm super grateful for Keith and even just my parents for taking me to those screenings and
Now,
stuff
explain
because
who Keith is.
yeah,
Yeah.
Keith Wolfer is the education director here. And yeah, he was always super generous in terms of, inviting us to all these screenings and definitely like just through those screenings alone. Like I remember one specifically, we met the filmmakers afterwards and they filmed an amazing documentary all on a DSLR, like a Canon DSLR.
Mm.
And my friend had the same camera. And we made the connection like, oh my gosh, we could make a movie like that. And they, use all these cool lenses and it totally inspired me to, continue following that journey. And yeah, and then in high school I just like jumped into it and, fully became a filmmaker, I think.
Were you both always kind of doc nerds? Do you feel like, or can you
Doc
remember
nerds, I like
when that we're gonna trademark that and start selling doc talk doc nerds.
I have not always been a doc nerd.
What do you remember when you got your switch flipped?
Yeah. So I fell in love with filmmaking at 10. I grew up in Tahoe National Forest in this little commune kind of away from town. And I didn't have anything else.
Wait.
All right, there's a story there.
Yeah, we're gonna have to buy a little time. We gotta explain when you say communes in the forest.
It wasn't a real commune, but
Okay.
I come from a family of 7. So
Oh.
there's 7 of us total. And yeah, we lived about 15 minutes from town, but we were isolated. Let's just say that, and very little internet out there.
Hmm.
So I didn't have much else to do, but my dad had this little DV camera. So I would recreate scenes from some of my favorite movies. I would take Lord of the Rings and pick my 5 favorite scenes and just recruit my siblings.
That's
We'd go out into the
amazing.
woods and
You had a
recreate those
cast.
scenes. Yeah. So I was just in love with fiction from age 10 up till that hasn't ceased. But I went to UC Davis first to start, and they didn't have a huge fiction program. They had a pretty extensive doc program. So all the classes I took ended up being documentary filmmaking courses. So I got seeped in the study of, you know, point of view, document a literal documentary comes from document. So we're documenting something that's true. And I was realizing there was a crossover between documentary and fiction. In good fiction, you're looking for something true underneath. And documentary is doing the same thing.
One of the things about the film, it's not a documentary in the sense, and obviously documentaries are evolving and there's a lot of artistry, which I really love in documentaries now, but I also appreciate, documentaries where it's just, here's some facts, here's some statistics, here's some things that you need to know. Your film is really experiential. Yes, you are documenting someone's life, but there's so much, and as Matt mentioned, at the beginning, um, it feels cinematic. It feels like there are things going on. It feels like you're racing through the streets of San Francisco. And a lot of the story is, but a lot of it is also just a dispensation of someone saying, hey, I was lost. I didn't know things. I came to this country. It's an immigrant story. It's a addiction story. It's a salvation story. And a lot of it is just story, and then it ends. And it's really beautiful in that regard. So not a question there, more than a compliment in saying that the things that as you talk about your influences, they're definitely felt in the end product.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I think just the background of having like both of our backgrounds and sort of the way we connected is that we both just love shooting movies. Like
Yeah.
even now, like we love like the idea of just grabbing a camera and shooting something, and we're obsessed with compositions and lighting and all that stuff. So having that technical background, I think when we approach documentaries, it's from a very like visual point of view, and we don't want it to just be like a talking head experience where you're just like looking at somebody, delivering information. We want it to feel immersive and felt
Yeah.
by the audience.
I'll also say in my documentary studies, I was really put off by the voice of God documentaries
Yeah.
because it's like, who are you? And why are you telling me the way that the
point of
world
view,
is? Yeah. But point of view is true. Like you can't say that Victor's story is untrue in any way. It's his story. You can disagree with what he decided to do, but it's what he did.
Yeah.
It's super moving and just beautifully made. So congratulations to you both. On Arepas and BC, been joined by the directors Yona Mosshammer and Brennan McGee. Your film is part of the official lineup of Doc Stories, and you're also going to be part of the schools at Doc Stories. So you're showing this to some future filmmakers,
Look at that.
potentially anyway. A whole
Circle is complete. Look
yeah,
at
the
that.
circle's complete.
Beautiful.
So congratulations and thank you for joining us here.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for having us. Yeah.
Matt, really, really enjoyed this week's episode of Doc Talk. Not just the conversations we had. It was really nice to get up to San Francisco, spend some time up there. Got to spend a little bit of time with you, which is always nice. I was going to say breaking bread, but we actually broke dumplings. It
We
was just it
did.
was a really
We didn't
nice
get
trip.
to have an arepa,
I-
singular or plural.
Yeah,
which we got to
but
make
now
up
we
for
have an
that somehow.
excuse. Yeah, we have an excuse to go back up there.
Yes.
We are going to, metaphorically speaking, we are returning to San Francisco next week. We have more conversations with some of the documentary storytellers that were both up at Doc Stories, but as well as people who've been involved in San Francisco film and their programming for a good time now. We are going to be speaking in our next episode with Kevin McDonald, who, among documentaries that he's made, one of them, probably one of the most powerful documentaries, one of the most painful documentaries I've ever seen. One Day in September,
Yeah.
which was about the tragic massacre of Israeli athletes at the 1972 games. Back with a documentary that is much more uplifting, beautiful, and engaging. It's called One to One, John and Yoko, and really about the unique time when John and Yoko were just arriving to New York City, living in the village, and really discovered much about themselves, and led to the only concert, if you can believe this, that John Lennon ever performed post Beatles, the only solo
the-
concert.
The full length concert, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, really remarkable, and really remarkable also to see Yoko Ono in a different light and really
Absolutely.
rehabilitating her image. The other film, the other documentary that we saw and the creatives behind it that we got to speak to, we'll get a little bit more into that next week. But it is a documentary that I was just primed to see and could not have enjoyed more. It's called Suburban Fury. The director, Robinson DeVore. We also spoke to the producer, Jason Reed. I don't want to give too much away, but as you know, Matt, it's a hoot and a holler, and I really dug it.
Yeah, about Sarah Jane Moore, and for anyone in the audience, you have a chance now to Google her if you don't know the name and her role in history, or
Yeah.
to definitely get into that film and Kevin McDonald's film.
Yeah. Both I'm looking forward to the continued conversation. As always, Matt, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you, and had a great time on the road.
Likewise.
And looking forward to seeing everybody back here next week on Doc Talk.